Imagine stepping into the intricate world of animals and, like, instantly understanding their every subtle movement, their intentions, their whole story.
Yeah, not just by watching, but having some kind of advanced AI figure out every little twitch and interaction.
Exactly. That sounds almost like sci-fi, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But actually training these cutting-edge AIs to truly get animal actions, it's proving to be, well, a much tougher puzzle than maybe people first thought.
Definitely more complex.
So today we're doing a deep dive into efficient, unsupervised animal behavior classification. We're going to explore, the real cutting-edge challenges and also the pretty ingenious solutions that pop up when we try to teach machines this stuff using these powerful vision foundation models. Our mission really is to give you a shortcut. It's a way to understand what's happening right at the frontier where AI meets biology and computer science.
We'll unpack the big hurdles researchers are facing, things like sheer computing power limits or even AI kind of hallucinating things.
Yeah, that's a wild one. And we'll look at how they're creatively getting around these problems.
Should be fascinating.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the big, ambitious goal. Using these things called vision language models, or VLMs, to identify animal behavior.
Right. The idea is the AI can see and describe.
Exactly. And at first glance, some ways to do this seem pretty straightforward, but they hit snags fast.
Always happens in research, doesn't it?
Yeah. So one early strategy was using those closed model APIs, think like the tech behind ChatGPT, to look at single frames of animal behavior.
Okay, so just static images.
Yeah. And for just one picture. It actually did okay.
Yeah.
You could get an AI to say, okay, this mouse is grooming in this one photo.
But that's the limitation right there, isn't it? Frame by frame.
Totally. It can't track continuous video, which is what behavior is. And like you mentioned earlier, it sometimes suffers from these hallucinations.
Where the AI just makes stuff up.
Pretty much. Reports behaviors that just aren't happening.
Yeah.
Plus, you can't tweak these closed models for your specific needs.
Right. No fine-tuning. It's like having this super smart assistant who's brilliant sometimes, but you can't train them. And occasionally they just invent facts.
Exactly. So then researchers looked at open source options. NVIDIA Velo was one. These are designed to take chunks of video as input.
Okay, that sounds more promising for continuous action.
It does. It lets the model use that continuous frame information.
Yeah.
But then, bam,
Yeah.
you hit the computational wall.
The VRAM requirement?
Oh, yeah. Extremely high. NVIDIA themselves were recommending at least 2 A100 cards.
Wow. Those are serious GPUs. Very expensive, very hard to get.
You got it. So that huge demand basically made Vela untestable for them because of resource constraints.
Just couldn't run the experiments?
Nope. And even trying something maybe a bit cheaper, like the Gemini API, still proved too slow and too costly when you're talking about analyzing tens of thousands of frames, which you need for solid behavioral work.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? That jump from understanding a single static picture to interpreting dynamic, continuous video.
Oh, yeah?
It adds so many layers of complexity.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between seeing a photo of a cat and actually understanding why it just twitched its tail that way or why it's crouching down.
Exactly. That temporal flow, the sequence.
And even the best tools they started with just couldn't quite grasp that nuanced flow of action over time.
Which is a massive challenge. And it leads us right into this very real bottleneck of compute power, doesn't it?
The GPU limits.
Yeah. A really foundational problem that popped up almost right away was just a severe lack of GPU computing power, specifically for these newer video foundation models like VJPF.
And it's not just about having any powerful graphics card.
No, exactly. It's about having enough of that specialized power to open up a big enough batch size. That's how much data the model sees at once when it's learning.
And without a big enough batch size.
Your model just doesn't learn effectively. You get really poor performance.
Right.
So researchers tried, everything. They tried tapping into institutional resources, things like ASCS.
2 computing clusters.
Yeah, but then they hit permission issues, couldn't get access. They struggled just to get high-performance cards like the L40s because the demand is just insane right now.
Everyone wants them for AI.
Totally. And even when they did manage to use some internal resources, like their Dyco's GPU cluster, the fundamental problem remained getting enough of the right kind of GPU muscle for these incredibly data-hungry models.
It really is like trying to run a Formula One car on a go-kart engine, like you said. The tools are advanced, but they need the right fuel.
Exactly.
And this isn't just about brute force processing power either. It's about having that specific high-end computational capability to handle the sheer volume and the complexity of video data that these advanced AI models require.
Hmm.
What's really insightful here, I think, is how the specialized needs for AI often run ahead of general computing progress. It creates these very specific resource shortages in really cutting-edge areas.
That's a great point. So, okay, moving beyond just the raw compute, what about the AI models themselves? Because it turns out, even when they can technically process the video, they don't always seem to understand what's actually happening in it.
Right. The interpretation layer.
Yeah. One key issue seems to be that a lot of the existing foundation models, they're just not perfectly suited for this really granular, dynamic world of animal behavior analysis.
Not built for purpose, maybe.
Kind of. Take Dino V2. It's a fantastic model for image stuff, great at recognizing features in a single picture.
Like object detection.
Right. But because it's fundamentally image-based, it just cannot process or understand temporal information time-based behavior, which is, everything in video analysis.
It's like trying to understand a movie plot by just looking at random snapshots. You miss the whole sequence.
Exactly. Then you have actual video foundation models like VJPay. They can handle video, but often they have a lower patch count and maybe lower resolution.
Meaning they don't see as much detail.
Yeah, effectively. So they perform poorly when you're trying to analyze really small targets or specific regions of interest ROIs, like, say, a tiny muscle twitch on a mouse's face.
Details that might be crucial for behavior.
Could be. And ultimately, even these really powerful pre-trained models, they aren't always a perfect fit straight out of the box for super specific tasks, like precisely decoding subtle mouse behaviors.
Needs more specialization.
And then we circle back to that hallucination problem and something related. Semantic inaccuracy.
Ah, yes, the meaning behind the labels.
Right. When you use the big language models, Gemini API, ChatGPT 4.0, to actually put meaningful labels on behaviors like grooming or exploring, they quite often just generate these fabrications.
They confidently state something that isn't true.
Yeah. Or they get the timing completely wrong. It's like having someone narrate a film, but they keep getting the sequence mixed up and sometimes just, invent scenes that aren't there.
That's a major issue for scientific accuracy.
Absolutely.
What's really critical here, I think, is the challenge of getting AI beyond just recognizing objects or even generating plausible-sounding descriptions. It needs to truly interpret the nuanced, continuous, and maybe even intentional flow of behavior.
That leap from description to interpretation.
Exactly. Recognizing shapes moving versus genuinely understanding that an animal is doing a specific pattern of actions, maybe with a purpose. That's the jump these models are still struggling with.
So, okay, if the models themselves have these limitations, even if you could feed them perfect data, how do you even start teaching them effectively? Which brings us straight into the really complex and often painstaking world of data labeling.
The human element bottleneck.
Totally. It's kind of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
AI is so powerful, but it often gets held up by this very human task.
Yeah.
Meticulous, expensive data labeling.
It's incredibly labor-intensive.
For sure. Manual key point labeling, where you're marking, say, a mouse's joints frame by frame. It's incredibly expensive and it takes forever.
Hours and hours for minutes of video.
Right. Now, there are automatic methods, like these latent extraction techniques, that can be effective, but the results can sometimes be inconsistent.
Why is that?
Often because of the randomness built into some of the methods they use, like UMAP. This is a statistical technique for grouping similar data points. It doesn't always give the exact same result twice.
So reproducibility issues.
Yeah, and often the clustering methods they use for classification, they just don't line up accurately with the known actual behavior types that biologists or ethologists recognize.
The clusters don't match reality.
Sometimes, yeah. And adding to all this, there's just a massive lack of sufficient labeled video data to really fine-tune these models properly.
Most footage is just raw.
Exactly. Raw, unlabeled video, which makes it super hard to directly train or refine the AI for specific behaviors.
You need that ground truth.
You do. And even when you have some labeled data, the standards for judging how well the fine-tuning worked, they're often kind of murky. Like, how do you precisely define what makes one compressed representation of behavior, a latent, actually better than another one?
What's the objective measure of good?
Right. It's a tough question.
It's just an enormous challenge, isn't it? What's fascinating is how the sheer amount of data needed, plus the costs and the precision problems of getting accurate labels, it just creates this huge bottleneck. It's not just about getting more video, it's turning that raw footage into clean, well-annotated data and doing it at a scale that's almost impossible for humans alone. It's this data mountain that AI needs, but we lack the gear to label it efficiently.
Don't despair, because our sources also lay out some genuinely clever, really cutting-edge solutions for these problems.
Yeah.
It shows incredible ingenuity in the field.
Okay, let's hear the good news.
Let's start with some brilliant technical method optimizations. One really key idea is basically assembling a dream team of specialized AI models.
Not relying on one do-it-all model.
Exactly. Each one plays to its strengths. So the approach is use a strong vision foundation model, like the Nano V2, as your base for pulling out features. Leverage its power in seeing static details.
Okay, the feature extractor.
Then you pair it with SAM, that's the segment anything model. You use that for precisely labeling the regions of interest. So telling the system exactly what part of the animal or scene you care about.
Zeroing in.
And finally, you bring in DLT models for tracking those regions across time points. Make sure you follow the same spot consistently through the video.
So you have an expert for seeing, one for pinpointing, and one for tracking.
You got it, like a specialized team.
Makes sense.
Another really neat technique is called patch-level latent trace analysis.
Okay, what's that?
So here, researchers take the compressed data, those latent vectors, from each tiny patch within a video frame.
Not the whole frame, but little pieces.
Right. And they use those vectors from the patches to form a time series. This lets the AI capture really subtle, nuanced features of how behavior changes over time at a very fine grain.
Interesting. So looking at micro movements within the frame.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's also hierarchical behavior clustering. The idea here is, first, you separate the easy stuff, static moments versus moving moments.
Broad categories first.
Yeah. Then, within the moving intervals, you further subclassify specific gestures or actions. This gives you this multi-layered, much more detailed breakdown of behavior.
Like a nested structure, moving, walking, sniffing, for example.
Exactly like that.
This really highlights a key trend in advanced AI, doesn't it? It's about smart integration, not just raw power.
Yeah.
The real cleverness is in putting together this sort of symphony orchestra of specialized AIs, each brilliant at its own part, instead of hoping one soloist can play everything.
That's a great analogy.
This modular approach is often the key to cracking really complex AI problems. It allows for much more precision than a single monolithic system usually can achieve.
Okay, so beyond combining models cleverly, how do we tackle those nagging compute resource demands? And how do we refine the AI's language integration to cut down on those weird hallucinations?
The practicalities and the reliability.
Right. Well, the sources offer some really resourceful strategies for saving computational power. One is using something called entropy-based dynamic computation scheduling.
Sounds complex. What does it do?
It's basically like a smart filter for the video. The AI learns to automatically spot the important segments based on changes in screen entropy, which is basically a measure of how much is changing on screen.
So it focuses processing power only when things are actually happening.
Exactly. It lets the AI concentrate on the information-rich parts and dramatically cuts down the overall compute load instead of wasting cycles processing, say, a static background.
Smart efficiency.
Yeah. And they're also looking into other ways to speed things up, like swapping out certain parts of the transformer models, substituting layer normalization with hyperbolic tangents.
Okay, deep technical stuff.
Yeah, super technical. But the bottom line is, it reduces the computational load and speeds up processing.
Faster and cheaper.
Hopefully. And on the purely practical side, the advice is pretty straightforward. Maximize the use of whatever institutional resources you can get, like that DICO's GPU cluster.
Use what you've got.
Right. And keep a close eye out for new computing resources becoming available. Apparently, there's a batch expected after the summer.
Good intel.
Now, as for making the language models, the LLMs and VLMs integrate better and hallucinate less.
Improving the understanding and description part.
Yeah. Researchers are exploring newer multimodal models, like Microsoft's 5.4, specifically for tasks that need to connect images and text well.
Models designed for that link.
They're also checking out downloadable LLMs you can run locally, Fuyu 1.5, FIFO. Being able to run these on your own hardware is a big deal.
More control, potentially lower cost.
Right. Though right now their video processing is still mostly developing, they're mainly focused on static images.
Still early days for local video LLMs.
Seems so. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Applying retrieval augmented generation, or RAG.
RAGI. How does that fit in?
Okay, so you combine the video analysis with a RAG system. This lets the AI basically look up relevant factual information from a knowledge base while it's generating descriptions.
Ah, so it can ground its statements in facts.
Exactly. It significantly improves the accuracy of the text descriptions and crucially cuts down on those hallucinations. It's like giving the AI a fact checker it can consult in real time.
A contextual safety net. That's clever,
Isn't it? And one more thing on the data side. Semi-supervised label propagation.
Okay.
The idea is you only need to manually label maybe 10% of your data.
Just a small fraction.
Yeah. Then the model itself automatically propagates or expands those labels to the rest of the unlabeled data.
The model learns from the small set and labels the rest.
Pretty much. It dramatically cuts down the human effort and cost needed to get a large, high-quality labeled data set.
Wow, that could be a game changer for the labeling bottleneck.
Potentially, yeah.
What's really fascinating here is this kind of two-pronged attack. It's not just let's find more GPUs, which we know is hard.
Right.
It's also about making the compute power you do have work smarter through clever algorithms like that entropy scheduling. And critically, making the AI's language side more reliable, more grounded in reality, using things like RAG.
Efficiency and accuracy together.
Exactly. Building systems that are not just powerful, but also trustworthy and capable.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the absolute foundation of all this AI learning.
Right.
The data itself and how we actually intelligently define and classify animal behavior.
The quality of the input and the structure of the output.
Precisely. For the data strategy and training the models, the sources stress that quality is paramount, especially at the start.
Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Pretty much. Initial model training should really prioritize high-quality, stably recorded videos, clear examples, basically.
Like teaching a kid with clear pictures first.
Exactly. Then, later in the training, you can gradually introduce maybe blurrier or noisier video data.
Why do that?
To test the model's ability to generalize how well it performs in less than perfect real-world conditions. Make it more robust.
Ah, stress testing it.
Kinda, yeah. And for the unsupervised approaches where the AI finds patterns on its own, they suggest incorporating reinforcement learning ideas. Specifically, something called inverse reinforcement learning.
Okay, what does that do?
It helps define a reward function implicitly. Basically, it helps teach the AI what a good or meaningful grouping of behaviors looks like without you having to explicitly label every single type of behavior beforehand. It guides the clustering.
Makes the unsupervised learning more stable and interpretable.
That's the goal. Now, when it comes to actually classifying the behaviors, the focus needs to shift a bit.
Away from what?
Away from just pinpointing exact key points like joints. The emphasis should be more on behavior patterns and the temporal dynamics, the flow of actions over time.
Seeing the whole dance, not just the individual steps.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And they recommend using visual back projection to check the results. Basically, you visualize the clusters the AI created back onto the video to see if they make sense visually over time. Do all the moments the AI grouped together look like the same coherent behavior to a human?
A sanity check. Checking for temporal consistency and semantic meaning.
Exactly. And critically, the behavior categories themselves shouldn't be rigid. They need to be flexible.
How so?
Researchers should be able to decide, based on their specific research question or what the classification results look like, whether to merge some behavior groups together or maybe subdivide others.
Tailoring the classification to the scientific need.
Right. It dramatically increases the model's practical usefulness and flexibility in actual research scenarios.
If we kind of connect that to the bigger picture, it really underscores a fundamental truth about AI, doesn't it?
Which is?
That even the most sophisticated algorithms are only ever as good as the data they learn from and the intelligence of the strategies we apply to that data. It's all about empowering the AI, not just to see the trees, the individual data points or frames, but the entire forest of animal behavior. Understand the patterns, the context.
Yeah, that approach moves us much closer to getting truly meaningful insights from all this technology.
Definitely.
Wow, okay. What a deep dive that was. We started with this really ambitious vision, right? AI understanding animal behavior.
Yeah, seemed almost magical at first.
And we definitely navigated some truly immense challenges, hitting those computational walls.
The GPU struggle is real.
Wrestling with those weird AI hallucinations.
Making sure the AI stays grounded.
And grappling with that whole painstaking, sometimes paradoxical process of data labeling.
The human effort needed to fuel the machine.
Thought.
What's genuinely inspiring, I think, is that we also uncovered these incredibly ingenious solutions along the way.
For sure.
From assembling those dream teams of specialized AIs
Yeah, the modular approach.
to employing those clever resource-saving tricks like the entropy scheduling
Making compute work smarter.
and finding smarter, more efficient ways to actually get the labeled data you need, like that semi-supervised propagation. The innovation happening here is just astounding.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? As AI keeps getting better, more sophisticated at understanding these really subtle nuances of animal actions, what kind of unforeseen insights might we gain? Not just about animals, but maybe about the very nature of consciousness, or even, the complex evolutionary roots of our own human behaviors.
That's the really exciting frontier, isn't it? Using this tech not just to classify, but to ask deeper questions about life itself. It feels like we're just beginning to scratch the surface.